Hello everyone. Some of you will have seen the video in which I read from the first chapter of my new book, You Are the Happiness You Seek, titled The Search for Happiness. And in this chapter I suggest that happiness is the very nature of our self or our being. Now we might reasonably object that if happiness is the very nature of our self or our being, and our self or our being is obviously present all the time, then why do we not experience its innate peace and joy all the time? And the answer is that whilst everybody undoubtedly knows their self or has the experience of being myself all the time, not everybody knows their self clearly. Why? Because for most of us, our sense of our self or our being is mixed up with the content of our experience, that is, our thoughts, feelings, sensations, perceptions, and so on. And this mixture of our self or our being with the content of experience prevents us from knowing ourselves as we essentially are. And it is this lack of clear self-knowledge that is responsible for the veiling or obscuring of the peace and happiness that are the very nature of our being. And it is for this reason that self-knowledge stands at the heart of most, if not all, the great religious and spiritual traditions. And it is for this reason that the second chapter of this book, You Are the Happiness You Seek, is titled Know Thyself. So I will read that chapter now. Chapter 2. Know Thyself. In the Christian tradition, it is said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. What is the kingdom of heaven, if not a realm of eternal happiness? The essential message of Christianity is that this realm of eternal happiness lies within us. It is the very nature of our being. In the Vedantic tradition of India, we find the same understanding condensed into three Sanskrit words: Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat refers to being, Chit to knowing, consciousness or awareness, and Ananda to peace or happiness. Thus, Sat, Chit, Ananda simply means that to know the nature of one. Sat, Chit, Ananda means simply that to know the nature of one's being is happiness itself. In Buddhism, it is said that the very nature of one's mind is inherently free from any imperfection. Cautious not to objectify happiness as a state of mind, the Buddhist teaching refers to it simply as the end of suffering. Thus, all that is required to access that happiness is to know the nature of one's mind. Indeed, if we were to distill the essential understanding contained in all the great religious, spiritual, and philosophical traditions into a single phrase, it would read something like this: happiness is your nature, or you are happiness itself. It follows that in order to access the peace and happiness for which all people long above all else, all that is necessary is to understand the nature of oneself. For this reason, the words "Know Thyself" were carved onto the entrance to the Temple of Apollo in Delphi, thus standing at the very origin of Western civilization. We all seek happiness, but most of us seek it in objective experience. In the approach that is being suggested in this book, we seek peace and happiness at its source, namely in ourself or our being. For this reason, it is sometimes referred to as the direct path to peace and happiness. A softening of attention. What does it mean to know oneself? In the early 1980s, I went with my brother Andrew to a series of Alfred Brendel's recitals of Beethoven's piano sonatas in London. During these recitals, my attention was, in general, fully absorbed in the music. But from time to time, I noticed a softening of its focus. On one occasion, my attention relaxed sufficiently that I became aware not only of the music, but of the fact that I was listening to the music. In other words, I became aware that I was aware. There was nothing extraordinary about this. On the contrary, the fact of simply being aware, or awareness itself, was clearly the most familiar and intimate aspect of my experience. However, I had previously overlooked it, so exclusively focused was I on my experience. On this occasion, the content of the music. In time, my attention was again drawn to the music, but I noticed that at certain points during the recital, it spontaneously disengaged from it and returned effortlessly to the fact of being aware. It even felt at times as if my attention were being pulled backwards, away from its content, towards the fact of simply being aware, or awareness itself. After some time, I noticed that I had the ability to travel backwards and forwards with my attention, between the music in the foreground and the presence of awareness in the background. I began to explore this new faculty, and at some point it became clear to me that in between the background of being aware and the foreground of the music, there was an intermediary layer of experience, a middle ground, so to speak, of thoughts, feelings, and sensations in the body. There were now three elements of my experience. One, the external world, consisting of the concert hall, the audience, and the music. Two, my mind and body, comprising the internal world of thoughts, feelings, and sensations. And three, in the background, the fact of being aware, or awareness itself. It was as if I had taken a step back from my mind and body, with which I normally identified myself. They were now part of the foreground of my experience, and I was standing as the presence of awareness behind them, watching them just as I was watching the performance. As my attention travelled back and forth between these three realms, it occurred to me that the person I normally considered myself to be, my mind and my body, was itself part of the objective content of experience that I was aware of, along with the auditorium, the audience, and the music. In particular, I noticed that my thoughts and feelings were a layer of experience that was not only added to my experience of the world, like subtitles superimposed upon a movie, but also through which I interpreted the world. Sometime later, I would also notice that my experience of the world was itself filtered through my sense perceptions, which impose their own limitations on whatever is perceived. This would in turn give rise to the question as to what the world is in itself, beyond these limitations. But for now, this challenge to my customary sense of self was enough. A shift in identity. At some point, a question spontaneously arose in my mind. Who am I really? Am I the thoughts, feelings, and sensations that I am aware of, or am I the one that is aware of them? I was familiar with the Indian sage Ramana Maharshi's use of such questions, a method known as self-inquiry, but had found it rather heady and abstract. No doubt the question that emerged at this stage was prompted by my previous interest in these matters, but nevertheless it arose in me this time as if for the first time, and was profoundly connected to my experience. This questioning was not just a mental exercise, nor was it a method that I was practicing in order to bring about a certain result. It seemed to be taking place spontaneously, although I was cooperating with it. It became obvious that whatever it is that knows our thoughts and images is not itself a thought or an image. What is that? Whatever it is that is aware of our feelings and sensations is not itself a feeling or a sensation. What is that? Whatever it is that perceives the world is not itself a sight, sound, taste, texture, or smell. What is that? It is simply that which knows or is aware. It is our self. It is awareness or consciousness itself. Until this recognition, I had considered myself to be a person, a body-mind, an amalgam of thoughts, feelings, and sensations. It seemed to be myself as this person who was aware of the world. As such, I considered awareness an attribute of the body-mind, a faculty that I as a person possessed. I now realized that the person I previously imagined myself to be was something that I was aware of, along with my experience of the world. I recognized that I was essentially that which knows or is aware of the entire content of experience, including the thoughts, images, memories, feelings, and sensations that constitute the mind and the body. I realized that it is not myself as a person who is aware of the world, but rather myself as awareness that is aware of the person and the world. The transition from the belief that we are a person with the faculty of awareness to the understanding that we are awareness itself may seem like a small step, but it has enormous implications for any individual and for the evolution of humanity as a whole. Indeed, I would suggest that it is the next evolutionary step, and that upon which the survival of humanity, as we know it, depends. The understanding, I am awareness, is the first great understanding. This is not an extraordinary recognition or something that is difficult to access. In fact, it is enshrined in common parlance. We say, I know thoughts and images. I am aware of feelings and sensations, and I perceive the world. In each of these statements, we recognize ourselves as the knowing, aware, or perceiving element, and thoughts, images, feelings, sensations, and perceptions as objects that we know, are aware of, or perceive. In other words, we are not essentially our thoughts, images, memories, or stories about our life. We are that which knows them. We are not essentially our feelings or sensations. We are that which is aware of them. We are not the sights, sounds, tastes, textures, and smells that constitute our experience of the world. We are that which perceives them. We are nothing that is experienced. We are that which experiences. We are not essentially anything that we are aware of. We are simply the fact of knowing, being aware, or awareness itself. Letting go. This is a question now. I understand that I'm not my body or mind, but who would I be if I were to let go of everyone and everything with which I associate or identify myself? Throughout this book, there are passages that start with questions that I have received at meetings and retreats, and they've been woven into the text of the book, and this is one such question. I understand that I'm not my body or mind, but who would I be if I were to let go of everyone and everything with which I associate and identify myself? You would be the same inherently peaceful and unconditionally fulfilled self that you are now, although you do not currently recognize yourself as such because of your entanglement in or identification with the content of experience. The only difference is that what you now consider a distant possibility would become your lived and felt experience. Every night you willingly and effortlessly let go of everyone and everything with whom you associate or identify and fall deeply asleep. In the experience of deep sleep, you are all alone. Everything that is not essential to you has been removed, and as a result, you experience the peace of your true nature. If letting go of everyone and everything were a traumatic or frightening experience, we would dread falling asleep at night. But we look forward to it. Why? Because it gives us access to the peace of our true nature, which is veiled by the activities of thinking, feeling, acting and relating during the day. In fact, when we fall asleep, we do not enter a new state. We are always essentially the presence of awareness. However, during the waking and dreaming states, we forget or overlook this, or more accurately, it is obscured by thoughts, feelings, sensations and perceptions. In these two states, awareness is so thoroughly mixed with the content of experience that it is not recognized as such. It is veiled by experience. Likewise, when we emerge from deep sleep into the dreaming and waking states, the presence of awareness that we essentially are does not change or disappear. It is simply veiled by experience. Our essential self of pure awareness does not need to be liberated. It is already and inherently free of the content of experience. So it is not necessary to let go of anyone or anything. All that is required is to recognize our essential nature of pure awareness that lies behind all experience and shines in the midst of all experience. Nor will you lose your ability to think, feel, act, perceive and relate. On the contrary, these activities will be greatly enhanced by this new understanding of yourself, for the one on whose behalf they arise and in whose service they are undertaken will be clearly known. So that was the second chapter, Know Thyself.